Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandra.
And I'm Hemkaur Saroya, and on the show today, Russian President Vladimir Putin has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire that will see a halt on all attacks on energy and infrastructure, stopping short of an all-out ceasefire. The two sides have also agreed to hold technical negotiations on maritime ceasefire and further full ceasefire and permanent peace. We'll of course bring you all the details of the high-stakes call between Washington and Moscow.
Also on World DNA, NASA astronauts Butch Willmore and Sunita Williams have finally returned to Earth. The SpaceX Crew Dragon spaceship splashed down off Florida's coast, concluding a mission that gripped global attention. We'll bring you all you need to know on that as well. Let's start with the headlines. This is World DNA.
After an unexpected 9-month stay in space, NASA astronauts Butch Willmore and Sunita Williams finally returned to Earth. They waved and smiled, emerging from the SpaceX Dragon, which splashed down off the coast of Florida.
Russian President Vladimir Putin agrees in a call with US counterpart Donald Trump to halt attacks against Ukrainian energy targets, but refuses a full ceasefire unless the West halts all military aid for Kiev.
Zelensky says Putin's truce terms show Russia is not ready to end the war, as he wants to weaken Ukraine. Ukrainian president backs energy truce but needs details from US president.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defends airstrikes in Gaza, saying negotiations on restoring ceasefire will continue only under fire. Says this is only the beginning, as strikes kill over 400 people in Gaza.
Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels claim they launched another attack against American warships in the Red Sea, their fourth time firing on the carrier group in 72 hours. US federal judge orders an immediate halt to shutdown of USAID agency by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, says dismantling of agency likely violated the US Constitution in multiple ways.
US National Archives releases final batch of files related to assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Move follows an executive order issued by Trump in January.
Alphabet will acquire cybersecurity startup Wiz for $32 billion. This marks its biggest deal ever to bolster its cloud business against Amazon and Microsoft.
Tennis governing bodies hit back at the Novak Djokovic-led Players' Union lawsuit. They dismiss accusations of cartel behavior and accuse the union of choosing misinformation over progress.
Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a call with his US counterpart Donald Trump, has agreed to halt attacks against Ukrainian energy targets.
but refused the full 30-day ceasefire that Washington has proposed and Kiev has already accepted. Despite this, Trump hailed the call as good and productive, insisting he has an understanding with Putin to quickly work towards a complete ceasefire and a wider settlement to the three-year-old war.
After last week's talks in Jeddah, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had said that the ball was in Russia's court as the Ukrainians accepted Washington's proposal for a full ceasefire. But the White House's statement following the Trump-Putin call made no reference to that agreement with Kyiv. It just said broader truce talks would begin immediately.
Russia has made it clear that any deal on the full ceasefire was dependent on the fulfillment of long-standing demands, complete cessation of Western military and intelligence support to Ukraine.
Also, the assurance that Kyiv will not rearm or mobilize during any ceasefire.
Now, in response, a spokesperson for UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the country will stand with Kiev for as long as it takes to ensure Moscow can never launch an illegal invasion again. France and Germany had a similar response. Speaking alongside French President Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Ukraine can count on us and can count on Europe, quote unquote.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine was favorable to a US proposed ceasefire on strikes against energy infrastructure endorsed by Russia, but needed more details from Washington first. He said once they get the details, they will prepare their response and the team will be ready for technical conversations.
If President Trump can find time, he is a busy man. If he has time he can phone at any time, we are ready to pick up. We are ready to discuss the next steps with him.
The Ukrainian leader, however, claimed that Russia was not ready to end the war, adding that Putin's whole game was to weaken Kiev. Zelensky claimed Russian strikes hit civilian infrastructure. In a post on social media, he said that a hospital in Sumy had been struck.
Also, explosions rang out and air raid sirens sounded over capital Kyiv, prompting authorities to issue an advisory. They urged residents of Kyiv to take cover in shelters, citing the threat of Russian aerial attacks. All right, for more on this, we are being joined live by Bishop Garrison from Virginia. He's a former senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense and a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and George Mason University Law School. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA.
Thank you for having me.
Now, to begin with, Mr. Garrison, of course, we know that there is going to be a deal when it comes to infrastructure and energy targets, and Russia has stopped short of a full ceasefire. That being said, what's your assessment of this partial ceasefire, if I could call it that, and what sort of negotiations can we expect when it comes to what they've said, technical negotiations on maritime as well?
Well, as the White House has stated, they see this as a beginning, a first step towards something that can hopefully lead to a lasting, long-standing peace. So a lot remains to be seen, just as you mentioned with President of Ukraine and his remarks regarding this particular plan. He needs to know more details, just like all of the other Western leaders that this is going to potentially affect, and to include EU and NATO member states. They want to know more about what this actually means. Right now, they're saying it is just a very limited ceasefire that relates back to energy infrastructure, as you mentioned. And only moments after the call ended, there were air raid sirens in Kiev, indicating that they were worried about, again, another Russian attack. So a lot remains to be seen here. President Putin has not made any indications about any type of longevity with this plan, or if he's actually officially accepted it.
Mr. Garrison, as far as a statement coming out from Russia on this, one of the things that came out was that Russia has made it clear that there is an unconditional need to eliminate the root causes of the crisis. Do you feel that rules out NATO membership for Ukraine, and how does that perhaps have an impact on the EU peacekeepers being deployed to the borderlines as was being planned, at least in the European side?
I think that's a great question. I think it affects both things. Russia has also indicated that it has no intention and it is not going to remove troops from any of the 4 annexed regions or regions that it already has troops in that are a part of Ukraine. It does not want to see Ukraine as a part of NATO membership, because then you potentially have NATO members invoking Article 5 if they need to come in and help protect Ukraine. And European allies have already indicated that they are going to do everything they can to support Ukraine. And Russia does not want to see European peacekeepers in the region. So, again, a lot remains to be seen as to what this type of ceasefire actually means and what it could potentially lead to. To be clear, a ceasefire, a true ceasefire, is an important thing and can potentially save lives. And I really support the White House in trying to achieve that. But a lot remains to be seen in this type of deal.
Right, Mr. Garrison. That being said, of course, we've seen that Trump has labeled these talks good and productive. He'd also earlier said that they'll be discussing land and division of assets. Just to expand on what Shivan just asked you, my question to you is, do you reckon that perhaps Trump overestimated how quickly he would be able to resolve this issue, and whether he had an understanding with Putin or not, and how that plays out going forward?
Well, I think the White House went into this hoping that they would be able to resolve it quickly through a variety of levers in their diplomatic disposal, so to speak. Whenever you speak of additional sanctions and pressures, kind of a carrot versus a stick approach whenever it comes to Russia. But again, Vladimir Putin has been pushing for this invasion for some time, and now you have a part of the war economy in which the Russian domestic economy is reliant in some parts on this war. And we've seen more than a few articles come out about this recently, in which there are great concerns about their continuous shrink in GDP and whether or not they could potentially run into a longstanding recession if they were to cease this activity and actually end the overall war if a peace were to break out. So there are a lot of incentives right now for Russia and for Vladimir Putin to continue this. And the question is going to be, well, how do the United States and Europe, NATO, bring Putin truly to the table and get him to understand it's not his best interest to continue this?
That's definitely an important point that's come up from this discussion, and what Haim just asked you, that Trump had mentioned land and negotiations over assets, and that the talks haven't reached that far yet. So perhaps, there is more optimism than result at this point, but at least any step forward towards a ceasefire is a good decision at this point. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Bishop Garrison joining us from Virginia.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and after an unexpected 9-month stay in space, NASA astronauts Butch Willmore and Sunita Williams have finally returned to Earth.
Well, the SpaceX Crew Dragon spaceship splashed down off Florida's coast, concluding a mission that gripped global attention. And footage showed the spaceship streaking through the atmosphere before deploying parachutes for a soft splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee in Florida at 5:57 p.m. local time. And the SpaceX capsule was carrying NASA astronauts Butch Willmore and Sunita Williams alongside fellow American Nick Hague and Russian cosmonaut Alexander Gurbanov.
Veteran astronauts Willmore and Williams had launched into space as Starliner's first crew in June for what was expected to be an 8-day test mission on the International Space Station. But issues with Starliner's propulsion system delayed their return, culminating in NASA's decision to have them take a SpaceX craft back as part of NASA's Crew 9 astronaut rotation mission.
Now, their return caps a protracted space mission that was fraught with uncertainty and technical troubles. With the splashdown, a rare instance of NASA's contingency planning, and the latest failures of Boeing's Starliner have been turned into a global spectacle. The astronauts had undocked from the orbiting laboratory of the ISS to embark on a 17-hour trip back to Earth. The 4-person crew re-entered Earth's atmosphere at around 5:45 p.m. local time using Earth's atmosphere and 2 sets of parachutes. The craft slowed its orbital speed of roughly 17,000 miles per hour. That's the speed it was coming at, to a soft 17 miles per hour splashdown.
Now, Residents of Williams' ancestral village in India were seen rejoicing at the astronauts' safe return to Earth as well.
The daughter of our village is returning. We are very happy. We have lit a lamp for her and prayed to Goddess Dolamata. This time she got stuck for 9 months and we were sad. But now she is on her way back to Earth. We are happy. Sunita visited this Dolamata temple twice earlier.
The astronauts will now be flown to Houston, where they will complete a 45-day rehabilitation program. Willmore and Williams' 286-day stay exceeds the usual 6-month ISS rotation. It ranks 6th among US records for a single mission duration, but the unexpected nature of their extended stay, initially without enough packed supplies, has drawn public interest.
Now, it also became a political lightning rod. President Donald Trump and his close advisor Elon Musk, who leads SpaceX, have repeatedly alleged that former President Joe Biden abandoned the astronauts and refused an earlier rescue plan. Trump has also drawn attention for his remarks, referring to Williams as the woman with the wild hair and speculating about the personal dynamics between the two astronauts.
Germany's parliament has voted in favor of Mer's massive spending plan to boost defense spending.
Now, the bill allows German state to spend $535 billion to upscale the country's civil infrastructure and invest in the military.
Well, the bill comes at a time when US President Trump's policies have shaken the foundations of transatlantic alliance. The debt break rule that maintained fiscal discipline over a decade after 2008 financial crisis has virtually been nullified. The vote made it through the parliament with 513 votes in favor. That is well above the 489 votes required. Now, the law still needs a 2/3 majority in Germany's lower house to become law.
Allowing German government to pump more money in Ukraine war and help building domestic military infrastructure. Ukraine is set to receive $4.6 billion in aid from Germany this year.
Germany's defense spending is on the rise since, in 5 years preceding 2025, Germany's defense spending rose from $53.2 billion US dollars to $96.9 billion in 2024. And the latest booster shot that is being dubbed as a fiscal bazooka is worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
And chaos erupted in Hungarian parliament after lawmakers passed a bill aimed at banning the annual Pride March.
In a show of protest against the bill, members of the centrist Momentum Movement Party ignited smoke bombs while Parliament was in session. Take a look at these visuals. And from West Asia now, while Israel resumes bombarding Gaza, American fighter jets are pounding Yemen.
Trump has warned both Iran and the Houthis. The Houthis have now said that they are not backing out. The rebels claim to have launched third attack on American naval assets in the last 48 hours. Iranian sources say Tehran told Houthis to cool tensions, but Yemen's Houthis say that more than 50 people have died in American airstrikes and they are at war with the United States. Take a look.
war is accelerating. U.S. fighter jets are pounding Houthi strongholds for a third straight day. Fighter jets from the USS Harry S. Truman, a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier stationed in the Red Sea, are carrying out precision strikes against multiple locations. Unlike previous administrations, Trump has given U.S. Central Command full authority to launch preemptive strikes against Houthi positions at any moment. The White House insists these attacks are defensive, but their scope is widening fast.
This is also not an endless offensive. This is not about regime change in the Middle East. This is about putting American interests first.
The Houthis claim to have carried out a third strike on U.S. aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman. On the other hand, there is anger rising against U.S. Thousands take to the streets of the Yemeni capital Sana'a, chanting anti-U.S. slogans.
A message to Trump and the U.S. Zionist aggression against Yemen. We tell them, know who you're challenging. Don't challenge us. Don't strike Yemen. Yemen is a graveyard for invaders. We have these rockets that can reach Israel and the White House.
Neither the Israelis, Americans, nor the British threats will deter us or stop us. We will keep moving forward and will strike the U.S. deep in the sea.
President Trump declared he will hold Iran directly responsible for any future attacks by Yemen's Tehran-backed rebels. Tehran says that Houthis are acting independently. Iranian guards warn that if anyone threatens, it will give appropriate, decisive and conclusive responses. The US is sending a clear message. Houthi aggression will not go unanswered, but Trump's latest warning takes things further. He now directly holds Iran responsible for the rebel group's actions. The threat raises a crucial question. If the strikes fail to deter the Houthis, will Trump risk a direct war with Iran? Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Tensions flared up in Somalia's capital city of Mogadishu after an explosion occurred near the presidential palace.
The Al-Shabaab Islamist group has taken responsibility for the blast. The explosion occurred moments after the president's convoy passed the region in the capital. While the President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud escaped unhurt, several others travelling in another vehicle sustained injuries in the blast. However, there are no reports of fatalities in this incident. The President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud was travelling to the Hirshabelle state, where the army is reportedly planning a major offensive against Al-Shabaab.
A big explosion rocked Mogadishu's Hamar Jajab district, especially the Horseed neighborhood. The Abdi Khan building has collapsed entirely. People whom we know and others we don't know were killed in the bomb attack. It is a deplorable incident, and we don't want it to happen again. I have heard between 7 to 8 people were killed in the attack.
The blast comes a week after militants from the Al-Shabaab group stormed a hotel in central Somalia. 9 people lost their lives in the attack, and the group has been fighting the Somalian government for over 15 years. Mogadishu and adjoining areas have been epicenters of these deadly attacks. Somalia's president has promised total war against Al-Shabaab group.
All right, with that, it's time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. Haim and I will be back with you on the other side. When we come back, a full report coming in from West Asia as well. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has warned that massive overnight strikes on Gaza were only the beginning, and the future negotiations with Hamas will take place only under fire. What does that mean for West Asia and the way forward in the ceasefire talks? We'll bring you the details on that.
Also on the other side, Wikipedia's parent organization has asked India's Supreme Court to overturn a takedown order demanding the removal of a page that describes Wikipedia's legal dispute with the domestic news agency. We'll get you the latest on this on the other side.
Talking the future of finance.
Dive into the world of tokenization with me
as we yield the power of tokenization.
Discover the future of
ownership, where I decode, demystify tokenization for you.
Empowering the tokenized revolution.
Get ready to dive for an in-depth look at tokenization.
Busting the myths around tokenization.
Catch me on Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet.
Token Money Magnet only on WION.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
From President Trump's threats on tariffs, anti-America claims, protection of Afrikaners, and now the expansion of South African ambassador to the US, the nation turns to Europe and vows to deepen cooperation at a summit in Cape Town as both grapple with aid and trade threats from the new US administration. In the arid regions of northern Kenya, where pastoralism has been a way of life for centuries, women are looking for alternative livelihoods, cricket farming. And a small factory in Bukavu, Eastern Congo, is baking biscuits as part of a local initiative to combat malnutrition exacerbated by recent conflict and looting. Watch World of Africa at these times on WION. World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Catch me on Token Money Magnet as we yield the power of tokenization only on WION.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA with Haim and I'm Shivan. Lots more on this side of the show as well. Let's start with the headlines.
After an unexpected 9-month stay in space, astronauts Willmore and Williams finally returned to Earth. They waved and smiled, emerging from the SpaceX Dragon, which splashed down off the coast of Florida.
Russian President Putin agrees in a call with US counterpart Donald Trump to halt attacks against Ukrainian energy targets, but refuses a full ceasefire unless the West halts all military aid for Kiev.
Zelensky says Putin's truce terms show Russia is not ready to end war as he wants to weaken Ukraine. Ukrainian president backs energy truce but needs details from US president.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu defends airstrikes in Gaza, saying negotiations on restoring ceasefire will continue only under fire. Says this is only the beginning as strikes kill over 400 people in Gaza.
Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels claim they launched another attack against American warships in the Red Sea, their fourth time firing on the carrier group in 72 hours.
US federal judge orders an immediate halt to shutdown of US aid agency by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Says dismantling of agency likely violated the US Constitution in multiple ways.
US National Archives releases final batch of files related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Move follows an executive order issued by President Donald Trump in January.
India's National Investigation Agency conducts raids at 10 locations in Jammu to probe cases related to infiltration and unearth the terror network, arresting over ground workers and supporters.
Siemens will cut 5,600 jobs at its digital industries unit, citing weak demand in Germany and China. The layoffs, its largest since 2017, come as competitive pressures hit its once high-margin industrial automation business.
Tennis governing bodies hit back at the Novak Djokovic-led Players' Union lawsuit. They dismiss accusations of cartel behavior and accuse the union of choosing misinformation over progress. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has warned that massive overnight strikes on Gaza were only the beginning.
And said that the future negotiations with Hamas will take place only under fire. According to the Health Ministry in the Hamas-run territory, the strikes, by far the largest since a truce took effect in January, killed more than 400 people across the Gaza Strip.
Netanyahu said Hamas has already felt the strength of our arm in the past 24 hours, and this is only the beginning. Israeli Prime Minister defended the resumption of airstrikes in Gaza, saying that military pressure on Hamas was a critical condition for securing the release of hostages held by the militant Islamist group.
Hamas already felt the impact of our might in the past day, and I want to assure you, and I want to assure Hamas, this is only the beginning. We will continue to fight to achieve all the goals of this war, securing the release of all our hostages, eliminating Hamas, and ensuring that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel.
Netanyahu also urged Palestinians in Gaza to avoid any contact with Hamas and get out of harm's way.
Palestinian civilians should avoid any contact with Hamas terrorists. And I call on the people of Gaza, get out of harm's way, move to safer areas. Because every civilian casualty is a tragedy. And every civilian casualty is the fault of Hamas.
Israel's new chief of the military staff, Eyal Zamir, met with Israeli troops during a visit to Rafah in Gaza. The Israeli army released a video to show Zamir visiting the area.
Meanwhile, thousands of Israelis gathered for an anti-government protest in Tel Aviv after the country decided to resume attacks on the Gaza Strip. The demonstrations began with a rally followed by a march towards Begin Gate near the Army and Defense Ministry headquarters.
In Jordan's capital, Amman, people took to the streets of Amman to express solidarity with Gaza after the Israeli airstrikes on Gaza.
Hundreds of people protested in central Paris as well, condemning the latest Israeli airstrikes in Gaza and calling for a ceasefire. The gathering at the place was calm, with protesters waving Palestinian flags and chanting, "We are all children of Gaza," quote unquote.
We are greatly concerned about the civilian casualties in Gaza now that fighting has resumed there. Our particular concern in Germany is, of course, for the remaining hostages, which is also the case in France, and the largest group among them are German-Israeli dual nationals. My clear demand to Hamas remains, release the hostages at last.
Turkey President Recep Tayyip Erdogan denounced Israel's renewed airstrikes on Gaza.
He accused Israel of committing a genocide during Islam's holy month of Ramzan.
The Zionist regime has once again shown that it is a terrorist state that feeds on the blood, lives and tears of innocent people with the brutal attacks it carried out on Gaza last night.
The United Arab Emirates has also condemned fresh Israeli strikes on Gaza and warned about the repercussions of military escalation. Hamas has called on friendly countries to pressure the US government into halting Israel's renewed airstrikes on Gaza.
The leader of Yemen's Houthi movement, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, said his group would escalate actions against Israel in response to its continued assault on the Gaza Strip. He vowed to take all possible measures against Israel and pledged unwavering support for the Palestinian cause.
We affirm that we will resume escalation at the highest levels against the Israeli enemy. We will do everything in our power against the Israeli enemy in support of the Palestinian people and will confront any American support aimed at targeting our country in support of the Israeli enemy through attacks on our nation.
Now, 10 days on, there has been no breakthrough by the Dominican Republic authorities in Sudiksha Konanki missing case.
The parents of the 20-year-old Indian student studying in US have now reportedly written to the authorities that they accept the drowning as the cause of death of their daughter.
Despite a mammoth search operation by the Dominican Republic and US federal authorities, there has been no headway so far. In a letter to the authorities, Sudiksha's parents have written that there was no foul play in their daughter's death. They've cited the version given by the person who was last seen with their daughter. The Pittsburgh University student arrived in Punta Cana on the 3rd of March, last seen at a resort near a beach. She went missing on the 6th of March.
Her friend Joshua Raib, in the statement to the authorities, has said that the duo was pulled out to sea by a strong tide and that it was him who swam her into shore. A statement that was mentioned by the President of Dominican Republic too.
We are concerned, and all government agencies are involved in the search. We are even conducting a very special operation at sea, because the latest information we have from the last person who was with the young woman indicates that while they were on the beach, a wave hit them, causing some situation, and we are searching.
Wall Street stocks have taken a beating on US President Donald Trump-led global trade wars.
After $5 trillion plunge in the S&P 500, investors are looking at the US Federal Reserve for reassurance on the economy. With the Fed in wait-and-watch mode, investors will pass the central bank's projections and statement for direction.
However, Fed Chair Jerome Powell faces the tricky task of reassuring investors and conveying the central bank's readiness to act if necessary. The US Central Bank is widely expected to keep interest rates unchanged later on Wednesday. However, interest rate markets show 3 rate cut bets for this year starting in June. And that is more than the 2 cuts projected by the Fed's previous estimates. If US policymakers stick to their 2025 plan of only 2 rate cuts, investors say it will be crucial for the Fed chair to stress the bank's readiness to act if needed.
The Trump administration has escalated and constantly changed tariff threats against America's biggest trade partners. More importantly, the US administration hasn't done much to downplay recession risks. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that the US and markets need a detox after Trump said that the US economy is going through a period of transition.
The 2-year Treasury, most sensitive to the Fed's policy, has declined almost 60 basis points from a mid-January peak to a trough this month of about 3.8%, the lowest level in over 5 months. Stock sell-off has resulted in a 10% plunge of the S&P 500 from its peak, wiping about $5 trillion. To put that in context, those losses on Wall Street over the past month are more than India's GDP. And Wall Street's so-called fear gauge, the VIX, at one point last week climbed to the highest levels since August. Gold has hit a new record high after racing past $3,000 for the first time ever last week.
And major airlines are warning of a sharp decline in travel demand.
And this is, of course, prompting carriers to revise their revenue forecasts for the first quarter. And this includes Air India CEO flagging shortage of aircraft. The slowdown is causing a rise in airfares as airlines work to maintain profitability. Our next report breaks down the key developments affecting the airline industry and your travel plans as well.
Airfares are on the rise, and it's not just due to seasonal trends. The combination of rising fuel costs, inflation, and reduced flight capacity is pushing prices higher across both domestic and international routes. While airlines work to manage these challenges, the demand for travel is slowing down, especially in the wake of economic uncertainty. Major carriers like Delta and United are already adjusting their forecasts, with Delta cutting its first quarter growth projections. This decline in bookings is being driven by both corporate and leisure travelers tightening their wallets as confidence in the economy wanes. The travel slowdown is hitting hard at major U.S. airlines. United has reported a significant drop in cross-border travel, particularly between U.S. and Canada, leading the carrier to retire 21 older aircraft early. While these moves aim to curb costs, rising airfares are making travel more expensive for passengers. Airlines are raising ticket prices to offset reduced demand and rising operational costs, leaving travelers facing higher fares in their near term. Now, despite the challenges in the domestic travel market, there's a silver lining for international travelers. A strong US dollar is helping American tourists stretch their budgets further abroad, making foreign destinations more affordable. Additionally, airlines are increasing international capacity and offering competitive pricing in an effort to fill seats. However, airfares are expected to stay elevated due to inflation and ongoing demand fluctuations. For those looking to travel internationally, booking in advance and taking advantage of favorable exchange rates could help minimize costs in the face of rising prices. Business Bureau Report, WION The World.
All right, let's now take a look at developments from the world of technology. Wikipedia's parent organization, the Wikimedia Foundation, has asked India's Supreme Court to overturn a takedown order demanding the removal of a page that describes Wikipedia's legal dispute with the domestic news agency. Wikimedia has said that complying with the directive would have a chilling effect on free speech. Last year, Indian news agency ANI sued Wikimedia for defamation over the way in which the news agency was described on the platform. ANI's lawsuit claims that its Wikimedia page unfairly describes it as a government propaganda tool and that its attempts to correct these descriptions were allegedly blocked by Wikipedia. While that case is still pending, the Delhi High Court in October ruled another Wikimedia page related to the legal dispute to be taken down, calling it interference in court proceedings.
In Germany, Apple has suffered a legal setback. The nation's highest court has ruled that Apple is a dominant force in the market and that stricter oversight is required. The ruling will allow regulators to impose stricter controls on the tech giant and closely scrutinize Apple's market position for potential abuse, placing it alongside other tech giants like Amazon, Microsoft and Google's parent company, Alphabet. Meanwhile, Apple has expressed its disagreement with the ruling, saying that the company has in fact faced tough competition in Germany.
Tech giant Meta has announced new measures to combat misinformation and deepfakes in Australia ahead of the country's upcoming national election. In a blog post, the social media company announced that any content that could possibly lead to violence and physical harm and interfere with voting will be removed, adding that it will also be making extra efforts to limit the distribution of misleading content through its platforms. Moreover, to ensure accuracy, the company will have its content fact-checked by news agencies, France Press and Australian Associated Press.
A civil war has erupted in tennis. The Professional Tennis Players Association, the players' union co-founded by Novak Djokovic, has taken legal action against tennis governing bodies.
Citing anti-competitive practices and a blatant